Greetings. I am Dr. Perceptron. Let me give you something to help you relax.
Welcome, one and all. We are gathered together here to discuss Quantum Leap, the 2022 Revival Season 1, Episode 16, this one entitled Ben Interrupted. If you are new here or have just otherwise forgotten, there will be spoilers ahead. Consider this your final warning. Now, on with the show. Before we get into the meat of the show, I just want to give a little bit of my thoughts about where we are in the season. I wasn't sure last week how many episodes we had left. I was thinking we were up to 20. We're actually only at 18, so that means 2 more episodes. Next episode is the penultimate of this season. Well, normally I'm very excited when shows get additional episodes. This show got additional episodes and a season 2 renewal, and that's fantastic. However, I think those additional episodes may have hurt this show in the long run. I mean, we had so many breaks here in the second half, as well as the fact that some of the additional episodes I don't think really added that much. This episode right here was just amazing. This seems like it's the type of thing we should have been getting all along, and I think by adding in those extra episodes they kind of prolonged the season because they still wanted the same end point, and by doing so they also ran into additional breaks and it just broke the flow. I think some people may have even fallen off of the show because of that. Had they stayed to their original concise number of episodes with the entire plot of the season already ready to go, I feel like it might have just been an overall better feeling. Now that I've gotten all that out of the way, let's discuss what actually happened in this episode. Last episode we saw Ben dealing with a courtroom situation in the 1980s. This episode he leaps into what we think is going to be somebody dealing with mental issues in a 1954 asylum. However, that was actually not necessarily the situation. He was a private investigator attempting to get himself committed to this asylum in order to work on a case. He was attempting to get the sister of the woman pretending to be his wife out of the asylum and also try to uncover some information whilst inside about what this madhouse was actually up to. It was the typical case of poor mental health, doctors running wild. It actually gave me a slight feeling of American Horror Story Season 2 Asylum, way back when the show was actually pretty decent and they told a relatively compelling storyline. This doesn't seem like the freshest storyline. Obviously, we've seen such things before, but that wasn't actually the intended purpose of this story. Everything kind of kicked it up a notch and went into high gear here. The only thing that I found a bit odd was the fact that Jen wasn't present. Maybe this had something to do with the fact that the actress was unavailable, or maybe there's another reason, an in-story and in-canon reason as to why she wasn't present. If that's the case, I will reserve judgment until we find out what's going on, but we did finally get Janice reintroduced to the story, and it feels like they were keeping her on ice simply because they had these additional episodes they had to fill, and they couldn't run headlong into her storyline too early, so they slotted in a few episodes without her. It just felt like we were heading down a track to get to Janice. We finally got her, we brought her into the program, then she sat on the sidelines for 4 or 5 episodes, only to be reintroduced right now at a very vital point of the storyline, and she actually finally reveals to us the plan behind what's going on. You see, it turns out that Ben was leaping because there was a mole inside the Quantum Leap facility. We kind of had that feeling going here, but we weren't necessarily certain who that might be. Well, we actually figure it out in this episode, or at least Janice is able to put 2 and 2 together based on something Ian says, and the mole within Quantum Leap has actually turned out to be Ziggy. Yes, that's right, the AI, the sentient computer, the one that's kind of running everything behind the scenes, seems to be the mole, and this actually does make a hell of a lot of sense. Since the other Quantum Leap program going on in the future is also run by Ziggy, that must mean that the Ziggy from the future and the Ziggy from today are both running the program. Is Ziggy somehow communicating with his future and past versions? Is there some sort of cross-time link here? Could Ziggy also be responsible for Sam in the past, or what's going on with that? And speaking of Sam, he was also referenced here. We actually finally got a original series report about the evil Leapers who Sam ran into back then, only on a couple of occasions, I believe. So that was a very nice touch, linking the evil Leapers or the alternate Leapers or whatever. I still don't think Martinez is evil. And he himself appears in this episode in the same vicinity. He leaps into another person, one of the subordinates of the main doctor, one of the people that was kind of treating everyone in this asylum terribly. And it's quite the interesting scenario because now Ben is a patient here trying to work undercover to set things right. Martinez is now in somebody a little higher up, a little bit more in charge, somebody who has more resources. Addison is in the imaging chamber at the time, so she sees the leap coming. I do like the fact that she's able to see the other Leaper. Again, they're utilizing the same technology, so why wouldn't her past imaging chamber still have the same interaction as the other one? And we get Magic on the comms talking to Ben directly. Now, he doesn't come into the imaging chamber, but I do like the fact that they're finally utilizing the other cast members, the other main characters from the Quantum Leap headquarters, going into the past and interacting with Ben, where primarily it was always Addison up to this point. Martinez is finally convinced to help Ben because, in essence, they're using the same technology, and they work out that in order for Martinez to leap, he still has to do the same thing as Ben. That means he also has to put right things that once went wrong. They mention the original evil leapers had to put wrong what once went right. So that means Martinez isn't necessarily on the same playing field as the original evil leapers because they're not at cross purposes. He still has to utilize the original Quantum Leap tech, putting things correct, making things go as planned. He and Ben have the same mission, and they also theorize that perhaps Ziggy felt that one Leaper could not do this alone, and that's the reason Martinez in the future and Ben in the present both leapt into the same time period, because Ziggy is kind of manipulating different periods of time, but it's the same core of Ziggy. Ziggy doesn't necessarily maybe exist in a stationary linear point in time. Perhaps Ziggy is omnipresent from the period Ziggy was brought online to wherever Ziggy dies in the future or is deactivated or whatever. That's a very interesting concept and something they didn't really touch on here. And I have to imagine that's something of a tease for season 2 or perhaps even the end of this season. And I think this also plays into the fact that we might be getting Scott Bakula very, very soon. Maybe as a cameo at the end of this season or at the beginning of season 2, but I think things are finally starting to come together. The Leap storyline wasn't necessarily the most fresh thing. It was fun. It's a great concept. It's a fun concept, and it's a very fish out of water situation that's also very, very cool. It worked well, but I think all of the overarching storylines coming to a head here, I think all of the revelations, I think all of the interaction between Martinez and Ben as two differently abled Leapers who have different personalities, and I like the fact that Addison interacted with the other Leaper, Martinez, here quite a bit as well. They all work to combine to make this episode something truly elevated compared to a lot of the self-contained QL episodes we've gotten this season, and I think that's the type of thing this show needs to do a bit more to give its own stamp to the Quantum Leap franchise. I obviously love all the self-contained episodes, watching Ben interact in small ways with just a family or a small town situation, that type of thing that made the original so quaint and fun, but I think that this new revived series is trying to do a more sci-fi feeling thing than the original, and if they're going to get their own personality and implement all of these side characters from the Quantum Leap project more directly into the show itself, instead of having them sit there and do their own thing, this is the type of scenario that we need to give them more of. All of the components were running well together, interacting with each other. The team was working on the problem. They were working on solutions, coming up with theories, coming up with what's actually happening. They were all interacting with Ben more directly than normal. And don't forget, they are also potentially utilizing future data to help in the past. And that's something that I didn't really touch on too much last episode when Jen changed history by giving somebody a winning lottery ticket or giving him the correct horse to bet on, something like that. I'm wondering if that's something we'll touch on again in the future, because I have to imagine that by doing so, she crossed some sort of line, or this might lead to repercussions that were never even intended. So I'm very, very interested to see how a lot of these things go. Everything ramped up in this episode. We finally got a lot of revelations that we've been waiting for, painfully waiting for. After all the delays, the breaks, the episodes that really didn't forward the overarching storyline at all, we're finally where I think we need to be, and I think we should have gotten here a bit sooner and had a bit more momentum, because it felt like after a certain period of time, we just stalled with the overarching storyline until they finally caught up to where they wanted to tell it. I hope that when they go into season 2, they have quite a firm grasp on what they're trying to tell, and they have a A point and a B point, and however they get there is pretty well mapped out, and there's not much of this mystery box delaying, because I think that hurts a show like this. I've really grown to like most of the characters on the show, even the ones that haven't gotten that much to do, because when they do come together, they mesh like that original work family that we were supposed to believe they are. One point of contention here, when they were starting to talk about there is a mole within Quantum Leap, who could it be? Suddenly, out of nowhere, they start showing us 20 or 30 other people who work within the Quantum Leap facility, who they basically just kind of forgot about throughout most of the show. I think in the first couple of episodes, we saw a lot of other background workers, and then for most of the run, we only ever saw our core characters, and maybe there'd be a couple techs walking around in the background. Probably for budgetary reasons or COVID restrictions or something like that. It just seems odd, though, that suddenly when they say, we've got a mole, they start showing all these extras we have no reference for whatsoever. I guess we also need to discuss the Martinez of the situation, because at the very end, he finally decides to turn on Ben, because they are basically at odds with each other here. They need to accomplish the same goals, change time in the same way in order to basically initiate the next leap. However, that doesn't mean that Martinez wants Ben to accomplish his goals. They are at odds here. So when Ben was finally successful, they had accomplished their mission. They needed these people to escape the mental hospital and get across the bridge in order to jumpstart the next leap, I guess you could call it. And Martinez decides that this is a perfect opportunity. He turns on Ben while Ben is trying to escape from the tunnels underneath the facility, kind of stabs him in the neck and leaves him for dead. And this was quite a heart-wrenching scene. We had Addison basically witnessing Ben dying here. There's not much she can do. She has no physical interaction with the world around her. All she can really do is trust her instincts and try to get through to Ben. We have Magic talking to her a little bit here, trying to remind her that you were in military intelligence here. You've done this situation countless times. You've talked people through missions over the radio. You have been in charge of people who had to get out of a situation who did not have help. So she relies on her instincts, talks Ben through this situation, all while he's in essence dying right in front of her. What would have happened had Ben actually died here and stayed dead? How is this going to impact him on his next leap? Is he going to leap into the next person completely healed, feeling fine? Or is there going to be some residual situations going on because he came that close to being dead? I'm loving the direction the show is heading in right now. 2 episodes left, so I have to imagine they're going to ramp things up even more from here. But let me know all your thoughts. What are you thinking of this show right now? Do all those YouTube things: like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, leave a comment, leave 5 comments, like at least 3 times. I don't know what I'm saying here, but until next time,